Well, you have in class. Okay. All right. Well, I want to invite everybody to stay where they're at. Well, I'm doing something a little different these next 2 Sundays. And I'm calling it...
Sorry.
Dun, dun, dun! Yeah, a few seconds later would have been perfect. We'll be talking about the danger of safety. The danger of your overwhelming thinking all the time being, I need to stay safe. Because it's an epidemic right now in the mentality of people all across our world. And what it's doing is denying them the kind of life that God intended for each of us to have. And this was an obsession even before the pandemic hit. And when Promise Keepers came to Stockton, goodness, I don't remember when that was, 2017 or something like that, Ray Johnson from Bayside talked about this very subject. He said, we are the most helmeted, strapped-in, bubble-wrapped generation that has ever been. And the obsession with safety robs us of the kind of life that God has for us. And then in August, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about the depth of God's love for you, because I don't think we have a good grasp on it. You ever have the mindset like you hear about people who go into prayer and they pray for 3 hours and they experience the blessed presence of God, and it's like, I don't know if I got 3 hours. Okay, I'm setting a timer. 3 hours is the magic time to pray, and then it's like, Lord, it's been 5 minutes. I'm running out of stuff to talk about, And it's not like God's up there saying, nope, can't bless you. You're only at 15 minutes, And what I found is much more about how much time does it take for you to detox. To stop thinking about all the squirrels and all the other things that captivate your attention. Early Baptist churches actually used to have the sanctuary as plain as possible, so it wouldn't distract you, and they thought, oh, those Catholics and Lutherans and Anglicans have all this stuff. All the stuff is also to draw you into the presence of God. The stained glass windows was their way of people who couldn't read meditating on Scripture because it depicted Scripture. So, how can we wrap our mind around the fact that God just loves us and wants to spend time with us? I didn't actually plan on saying all this, but I think one of the things that I've come to find out, I had a friend who was the principal of, I think it was John R. Williams School out north, and mostly low-income kids from difficult families. And the principal drastically raised the academics of the student population by gathering them all in the multi-purpose room first, and while feeding them breakfast, had a process to detox them from home. Because if you're afraid of what's going to meet you at home, you can't pay attention and learn. You literally cannot hear what the teacher is saying because you're so nervous and preoccupied by what's going on at home. And she would have them pretend, take off your home hat and put on your school hat. And she would talk them through a whole process. She pointed to pennants from colleges all over the state and country, and she'd say, which one are you going to go to? She just talked them through to get them into a different mindset so they could focus on their schoolwork instead of being afraid of what might meet them when they get home. That's part of what worship does. It takes our mind off of everything else, hopefully, and then focus on Jesus. I think I mentioned before, I was in a Juneteenth gathering, and a reporter asked the black ministers there, how come your church service lasts 3 or 4 hours and white services last 1 hour? And without hesitation, one of the pastors said, because after working the fields and then being beaten all afternoon, it took 3 hours to take all that off and get into God's presence and not be occupied by it. So it's not that God has a rule book. Okay, you got to spend this much time, and then you are worthy of my presence. No. It's, when will you let go of all this stuff and just let me love you? So, okay, that's like the short feature before the main feature here. But I just wanted to put that out there because I found that's a daily struggle. When Paul talked about how the law prevents us from really enjoying the love of God, the law is any rules you made up to earn God's favor. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, you have God's favor. So let go of that and just enjoy His presence.
Be still.
Be still and know that I am God. Exactly. Well, we have a natural desire to seek safety. I mean, if you don't, you have some syndrome that needs to be treated. But we have a natural desire to seek out safety, to try to avoid injury and to try to avoid suffering loss. And so I wanted to kind of speak to that today because there are promises of God that we can look to. And I have to tell myself this, so I'm always telling you all. So when you look to the promises of God, either it's true or God lied to you. And we know that God does not lie. So you just got to wrap your head around the promises of God. But there are loud and frequent voices around us that are constantly warning us of danger. I mean, if you want to sum up the headlines of 2020, it's this. If COVID doesn't kill you, Trump will destroy the world. There's the headlines for all of 2020. That was it. And see, if the media can make you angry or afraid, they suck you in and you think, I better learn what else is out there. And you click on the next story and the next story. And because of that, Facebook and Google, their algorithms that their computers thought up, the programmers didn't do it, the computers thought this up. They feed you more outrageous stories according to what you like, and it pushes you to more and more fringe till finally you're like, who are these idiots? Why don't they get it? It's obvious. And meanwhile, they're over there, what are those wacky people doing? It's obvious this. And it's completely polarized. And our nation is becoming less and less science-based, less and less God-based, and more fear and anger-based. It's by design. Because every time you click on another news story or video, they get a little bit more money. So there are loud voices constantly warning us about danger out there. Now, there are those who calculate the threats and they make judgments based on probability. Well, if I go to the store, I probably won't get shot by a sniper. I live in Stockton. Being a sniper requires training. They're not that patient. So I'm not worried of sniper fire. It's probably not going to happen, right?
Drive by maybe.
Yeah. You hear the car coming, you can duck.
Yeah.
But then there are also those, especially those who are in law enforcement or military, have military combat experience, that base their concerns not on probability, but on possibility. Is it possible there could be a sniper somewhere? And unfortunately, if you've been trained to look for that, it's really hard or impossible to untrain yourself. So when they go to the gas station, they don't just scan 360 degrees, but they scan 180 degrees also. Anybody on the rooftops? And it's just because if you didn't do that in Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam, you could die. So the rest of us get to live in the thing of what is probably going to happen, because there are people out there protecting us who think, what could possibly go wrong? And then they not only think of that, but they formulate an entire plan of what to do in case something like that happens. It's very rare that some of us face that. I remember one Sunday when church was out, I was packing up. I was the only person here. I was getting ready to leave. I was over here packing my briefcase, and this big, tall kid came walking in, kind of buffed. And I'm like, uh-oh, who's that? You know, because it's after church. Everybody's gone. He has like a plastic grocery bag, sets it on the table, and starts walking up like this.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, he looks vaguely familiar. Oh, yeah, last time I saw him, he was a foot shorter, and the sheriff was taking him out in handcuffs. I called the police because he was beating up his sister. So, and he stabbed somebody while he was in prison. How'd he get out? And here he comes, just me. And I'm thinking, Jesus said, be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. So I smile. And I think, shake his hand with the right, punch with the left if you have to. But what else am I going to do? And he comes up with all seriousness and says, Pastor White, I just want to thank you for praying for me while I was inside. I finally got the help that I need, and I'm excited about my new life on the outside. I'm like, oh, God bless you, son. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Thank you, Jesus. So I thought about possibility, which didn't happen. So thank God for that. But unfortunately, the possibility thinking in the negative sense is becoming more and more the norm. People are fed fear of crazy possibilities, even though it is very unlikely. I mean, 20 years ago, they were saying that in 20 years, New York City could be underwater because climate change is melting the glaciers and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, we don't have any cities underwater like they said 20 years ago would happen, but now they're saying, in another 20 years, it's going to possibly happen. You know what the real danger is? Never actually living. Never actually living. I mean, we could create pods, put people on life support, put a screen in front of their eyes and call it life. Keep them safe as long as nobody trips over the extension cord. So, each of us, that's the image in my head. So each of us, I've kind of imagined a scale. Over here, we have those who live recklessly, and over here are those who have chosen to be a recluse. Reckless and recluse. That's really what most of our society is categorized right now. If you're reckless, then you're putting yourself in harm's way just to make a point. You can't take away my freedom. I'm going to wear red shirts and sweats in Stockton. I can do what I want. Some craziness like that. They don't believe there's any danger, and they're going to prove it by their bold actions. And then there's the recluse, who isolates themselves out of fear, whether that fear is real or imagined. Also, isolating yourself, then you don't have to deal with people, which you might think is the biggest danger of all. If you're an introvert, you need time alone to detox from your interaction with the public. If you're an extrovert, 2020 was your worst nightmare. But somewhere, and I'm not necessarily going to say somewhere in the middle, because we all have to find a balance in that, but somewhere you have the people of God who ignore those other issues, and instead, they just follow Jesus' commands. If Jesus said, go do this, then they're going to go do that and trust Jesus with the fallout. Because Jesus never really invited his disciples to come, enter my bubble and be safe. It's not what he did. And unfortunately, I've heard Christians who say, oh, well, as long as you're in the will of God, nothing bad will happen to you. Gee, what about Jesus? Right?
Right.
I mean, what about his disciples? The only one that died of old age was John, because Jesus charged him with taking care of his mom. That's what the oldest son was supposed to do. So, yeah, bad stuff happened to them, but you know what? They signed up and said, doing what God commands me to do is worth the risk.
Amen.
Now, a lot of you know this last week I was in South Carolina at the International Conference of Police Chaplains. The whole folks, we had chaplains from Africa, Europe, Asia, the United States, Latin America, all there in training events on how to minister to police officers, because police officers risk their life to save people, and those people say, you're evil, and we hate you, and we wish you were dead. And yet they still go. And they choose to go into the unsafe places to rescue people. They signed up for that. And they didn't sign up for the pay, because how much would somebody have to pay you to do it? So people follow God's commands. They enter the dangerous places that He calls them to seek and to save the lost, to share the love of Jesus, and to further the kingdom of God. It's what Jesus calls us to. He calls us to abundant life, not the safe life. And again, I'm not calling you to be reckless in the name of Jesus, because I've seen people who take off, I'm going to do something spectacular for Jesus. And Jesus is like, actually, I'm going this way. We call those people Peter, right? Peter was always, he'd draw the sword. Jesus, smite somebody for you, you know. And he's like, picks up his ear. Now, put the sword away. Where can I go do something else? Yeah. Charles Carnahan always tells me, well, I'm Peter. I'll just cut an ear off. You know, I'm like, no, we're going this way. But hey, those types make up for the other ones that just don't do anything, and they just sit there and don't budge. I'm just enjoying God's presence till I die. Well, Proverbs 22, verse 13 says this. The sluggard, if you've never heard that word, it means a lazy person. They sit there like a slug. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed I'll be killed in the public square. So in other words, he makes up excuses to sit home and do nothing. He's like, oh no, I can't get a job. Somebody next to me might cough and I'll catch the virus and I'll die. I need to stay home and just keep pushing my senators to send me more free money. So yeah, Proverbs 22:13 says that the lazy person doesn't leave the house or do anything because there's probably a lion outside. Is there probably a lion outside? Probably not, especially here, right? Now, I had a friend who lived in Africa, and you know, it was hot during the day, so everybody took a nap, and his best friend snuck into his hut, tied a string to the back of his robe with a tin can, went back outside, and then started yelling, "The lion is coming!" And everybody in the village takes off and starts running, and he can hear it right behind him. I don't know how far he ran. He eventually came back, told his friend, "You are evil." Yeah. So in other words, here in Proverbs, they make up some improbable danger as an excuse to sit around and do nothing. They don't consider themselves lazy. It's just what they tell themselves to justify doing nothing. And so it's not like they're like, I don't feel like going out. They actually justify why it is good and right that they don't go out. Why it's good and right they don't lift a finger to help anybody else. Oh, they'll get online and yell comments that the government needs to help them. I'm not going to do it. My sister is a pediatrician, a children's doctor, and every now and then she's got to do something unpleasant, like give them 3 shots or something like that, and the kids are, bracing themselves. So she likes to distract them, and her favorite thing to say to them is this: "Let me tell you the story about when my brother saved a little girl from a lion." And like, wow. You've all heard about when I went to Bangladesh. And I stayed with a Bangladeshi family for a week. And one day they said, "We're going to go to the zoo today." I was there to help him with his English. He said, "We're going to go to the zoo." I'm like, to the Jew? Yes, the Jew. I said, tell me about this Jew. He goes, well, there's cages and animals. I said, oh, a zoo. He said, yes, a Jew. So I had to teach him, because there's no difference between J and Z in their country. So we go to the zoo, and we're looking at stuff. And part of the joy of third world countries is there's none of those pesky safety laws. I mean, if you want to try to pet the lion, knock yourself out, you know. If you want to jump in with the hippos, oh well. Chalk up another one for Darwin's theory. So we go to the lion cage, and it's just a round ceiling and a round floor from top to bottom, with bars going from top to bottom. And so I walk, and the lion is walking around roaring, like, yeah, I'm bad, you know, just big African lion. And so they do have a handrail to keep you out of arm's reach, you know, if you want to avoid the lion's reach. So we go up to the lion, and he's walking around roaring. So there's me, and then there's this family, and then there was this 10-year-old girl that was with us. She dressed all up in a nice yellow dress because that was the idea of going out somewhere fancy, was go to the zoo. She's on the other side of them. Now, in Bangladesh, men and women never touch each other in public. Husbands and wives, they don't hold hands in public. That's something you do behind closed doors in your own bedroom. If two men are good friends, they might hold hands, but not two women, or not a man and a woman. So men never touch women there in public. And so we're all there watching the lion, and the lion's roaring, and then he sees the little girl in the yellow dress. And he stops roaring, and he just stares at her. So everybody kind of laughs, like, what's up with the lion? And he walks towards her until his nose is right on the bars. And everybody just kind of laughs, because we're like, what is this cat thinking? And then all of a sudden, he just turns completely around, and his tail flips straight up and starts to shake. And I took off running, and I ran around the family, and as I ran by the girl, I grabbed her and picked her up and kept running. And then the lion sprayed for about 10 feet past her. And at first, everybody gasped because this man grabbed this 10-year-old girl and started running with her. And then the lion sprayed, and then they're like, whoa! And they all thought I was like a prophet, because how did you know he would do that? I said, my mother had many cats. So in that moment, my sister explains this to small children. That's how he saved the little girl from the lion, because, yeah, that would have been a nasty cab ride back to the house. What was the risk that I took in acting? I could have just stood there and thought, oh man, too bad for her, right? What was my risk? Well, being too slow and being in the spray myself, or an angry mom thinking, angry mob thinking, oh, we punish men for death for picking up girls and running with them. But I actually felt the greater risk was doing nothing. I thought, oh, this is going to be awful. How humiliating for her if she just stands there. You see, sometimes playing it safe can be the bigger danger. God calls us to do certain things. And when we look at him and say, oh, it's not safe, you're speaking about how weak or cruel your God is. If you think he can't take care of you. And again, I'm not talking about being reckless in the name of Jesus. I'm saying when you follow where Jesus is calling you to go. Right now, parents are obsessed with keeping their kids safe, to the point of putting them in danger. Doctors tell us there is a wave of childhood leukemia increasing in our nation because their parents aren't letting them play in the dirt. Oh no, don't go out and dig in the dirt. It's not safe. There's germs. You'll get sick. So they're not exposed to the natural stuff in the world around them, and so their immune system isn't built up. I mean, some people are like, yeah, I've made it through all kinds of trouble because I've drank out of the garden hose when I was a kid. I was exposed to God knows what. But they don't think it's safe, and yet it's killing their children. So we have to stop thinking of safety as the ultimate virtue. Every day our kids are hit with a message that death is just around the corner, and it's creating a culture of fear, hopelessness, and depression. And so across the nation there's been a rash of suicides among children. That used to be almost unheard of. Children are increasingly involved in gang violence and killings in cities that have never had that before. Because these kids are no longer playing sports, they're no longer going to class. They are angry, they're depressed, and they have no group to identify with now except for the local gang that's inviting them in. So unless they come from a family with a strong family identity, they are at risk because we're trying to keep them safe. I mean, you can almost hear the words, oh, that child hanged herself. Oh, well, at least she didn't die of COVID. But the good news is twofold. One, you can avoid getting drawn into all that. And two, God has empowered and equipped you to help keep others from it. But see, if the devil convinces you that he can't protect you from the danger, that God can't protect you, then you're not going to worry about anybody else around you. Right? I used to tell my boys jokingly, the law of the jungle. You don't have to be the fastest person to get away from the lion. You just have to be faster than the slowest person. Right? Not the most godly advice, but that's why we put a club on our car. Make the next car easier than yours. But if the devil convinces you that you're not safe and that God won't take care of you, then that's going to be your greatest concern. And like those children in the school, you're going to be so preoccupied with that, you're not going to give anybody else a second thought. But you can avoid getting drawn into all that, and God has empowered and equipped you to help keep others from it. Let me break to you some tragic news. You are going to die. The statistics are pretty grim. 1 out of every 1 person dies. It's just a matter of when. Yeah, I had a doctor I went to see about athlete's foot, and he came in and he goes, well, the bad news is you're going to die. I'm like, what? He goes, good news, it could be 80 years from now. And I'm like, really? There's no getting around the fact that each of us is going to die. The big question is, what are you going to do while you're still alive? That's where you have the biggest choice. Jesus has called us to set the captives free. You can't do that holed up by yourself, isolated, looking at everybody else as a possible threat to your existence. We're not called to spend our life looking for safety, because Jesus called us to storm the gates of hell and set the captives free. Does that sound safe? Nah, really. I learned a valuable lesson one time. I went out to play paintball. It was Crosstown versus First Baptist. I'd never played paintball before, but a bunch of people in the name of Jesus shooting at each other. And so we go out, and I see these nuts. They're like, the whistle blows to start, and they're like, ah, and they go running forward. I'm like, that's where all the fire is. And I find something safe to hide behind, and blink, blink, just try to snipe them. I lost every time. Every time. Because number one, I will never capture the flag, staying back here. And number two, if our team loses, I'll be the only guy left while the hordes are coming in. So I would be stunned that these guys would run screaming towards the gunfire and come back with the flag. And I'm like, you're amazing. How did you do that? He goes, I went. Storming the gates of hell can be a risky business. But we have a commander-in-chief who knows what he's doing. He knows the kind of cover he has called in for you, even though you can't see it. But when you know he loves you unconditionally, then you're going to trust him with it. But see, there's an enemy that tells you, if you try to go out, the lion will get you. Well, let me ask you this. What if the lion's real? 1 Peter 5:8 says, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Understand this. He will growl threats saying that he will steal from you, kill you, or destroy you if you try to live as Jesus has called you to live. And he never has to inflict injury on you to defeat you if you just believe his words and stay holed up and think it's not safe for me to talk to anybody else, to interact with him, to mention Jesus here or there. I've been asking people, how easy was it for the government to shut down all the churches in America in an instant? And they didn't even threaten us. They just said, there's a lion out there. Now, I'm not saying the pandemic isn't real, and just about everybody I know now knows somebody who died from it. But we have not been called to hole up somewhere. We have not called to be a recluse, and we haven't called to be reckless. But the devil growls, he threatens. But how has Christ called you to live? He doesn't say, go do something bold and impressive, and I will applaud and let you in. No, he says, come, follow me. 1 Corinthians 12, the chapter talks about how we are a church, as a church, are the body of Christ. Okay, a dismembered, scattered body is a gruesome sight. We are called to gather with one another. That's why our brothers and sisters in Iran and Saudi Arabia and North Korea risk their lives to gather for worship, because where two or more are gathered, Jesus is there also. 1 Corinthians 13 tells us everything you do in the name of Jesus, your motivation has to be love, or you're just annoying or damaging. I've met people, yeah, my gift is prophecy. I just tell people like it is. It's like, yeah, you're a jerk for Jesus. You have no love for people, and God himself wishes you'd shut up. He tells us to love others. Verse 1 through 3 in 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I speak with the tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. In other words, if you can speak in tongues, but you have no love for people, God himself wishes you just shut up. It's annoying. You're making him look bad. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and knowledge, and I have a faith that can move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and offer my body up to hardship or the flames, that I may boast, but don't have love, I gain nothing. See, God is not impressed with your tasks. He can accomplish anything without you. But he loves you, and he wants to be in relationship with you. And God is doing amazing things, and he invites us along for the ride and to be a part of it. But you don't love people by staying away from them or leaving them alone. 1 Corinthians 14 tells us that the Holy Spirit empowers each of us to do more for each other than we would normally be capable of doing ourselves. I was in a chaplain's seminar a few years ago, and a hot topic was church shootings and how to protect yourselves. And some police officers in the audience said, well, I kind of struggle whether or not to take my gun to church. And the speaker looked shocked. And he said, your community has authorized you to carry a weapon to protect them. How dare you go out among them without your weapon? The Holy Spirit empowers each of us to do more for each other than we could normally be capable of doing ourselves. But I guarantee you can do nothing if you don't interact with people. Now, yeah, some people are stuck at home. They can't get out anymore. They're disabled. But you know what? They can rock the world on the phone. Talking to people, checking on people who feel neglected, telling them about movie night across town or whatever else is coming up. And people wind up looking forward to hearing from them. And I heard one pastor say, we have this little lady, she brings all of our first-time visitors back. Because she calls and she just sounds so sweet. And how is our pastor? I miss going to church. I'm disabled. I can't do it. Oh, the service was great. The music was amazing. Blah, blah. Can you do me a favor? I'm going to call you next week. Can you tell me how church was? Boom, they're obligated because the little lady's going to be calling them. They can't let her down, so they make sure they go back the next Sunday. Yeah, she's been around for a while. She's sharp. But if God empowers and equips you to give words of hope to someone on the edge of destruction, but you're too afraid to say anything, you have chosen to follow the devil's lead. He has told you, no, it's not safe to bring up Jesus with them. You might offend them, or you might make them feel bad, or this, that, or the other. So you take the safe route and do nothing. How many times do you hear about, oh, domestic violence, but I didn't want to get involved, so I didn't call. I did nothing. Like you're the caring person not to get involved. Jesus got involved in the middle of our mess. Matthew 25, verses 41 through 45 says this, "Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you didn't clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me.' They also will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?' He will reply, 'Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.'" And you can't do any of that by avoiding everybody. I mean, I rarely say something like this here at Crosstown, but you notice he said hell was prepared for the devil and his angels. He didn't say it was prepared for people. Earlier in Matthew 25, he says the eternal kingdom that was prepared for you before the earth was even created. For those who basically show the love of God. But he basically tells you, you helped no one, so you are going to hell, is what he said. It was prepared for the devil and his angels. You've been following him all this time. You're going to follow him right into the flames. And they thought they were playing it safe. With the devil's threats, he halts the progression of the kingdom of God, halting the coming of God's intended peace and joy for us. Now, you can fake righteousness by demanding that someone else do something, but Jesus has called us to risk following him and doing what he said to do. I mean, it's pretty simple. Our culture was kind of built on that, showing kindness and compassion to people who are going through a hard time and difficulty. Something I found that just blows my mind is one of the best ways you can bless people is just listen to them. At this chaplains conference, I'd see these confident men and women who love serving officers, and when I would sit down and talk to them, almost without exception, they would find out it's safe enough, and they would talk about the most horrific disasters that they've been through. And say, only the love of Jesus got me through it. And there's nothing special about me, so I know he'll do it for others too, and that's what compels me to go and to share. One pastor I sat down with is from Tracy, California. We had to go to South Carolina to chat, but he's from Tracy. And he went and took a pastorate at a church because something horrible happened in that church years ago. And they get hate mail still. And they're just kind of huddled trying to survive. And they're so broken, and the perpetrators aren't even there anymore. And he's like, they need the love of Jesus. And that's where he chose to be a pastor. See, Jesus has called us to risk following him and doing what he said to do. Lazy, fearful, and greedy people demand change so they don't have to look at the problem anymore. They demand somebody else do something, whereas Jesus looked at the disciples and said, you feed them. Love gets alongside other people in difficult situations and gets to know the people. For instance, everyone is shouting and demanding gun control, right? Because nobody's lining up to come alongside angry teenage boys to let them vent and talk about why they're so depressed. They'd much rather deal with guns because guns, there's no messy conversations. Because it used to be legal to walk around with a gun on your hip and nobody was shooting up schools or one another. The problem is the anger and the depression and the hopelessness in young people. But nobody wants to go out there and deal with that mess. Because unless you're equipped with the love of God, what are you going to do? People are too afraid it's going to cost them, and that would be a sacrifice. But 1 John 4:18 says, perfect love drives out all fear. And again, I used to panic, and I felt way too guilty as a kid. I'd read, perfect love drives, great, I've got to feel perfect love, don't be afraid. Then I'd be afraid I didn't have perfect love. Like Paul said, oh, wretched man that I am. Mm-hmm. Well, then I figured out, no, his perfect love drives out all fear. You can gain that perfect love to drive out all your fear. How can you go out and do what God has called you to do without unnecessarily putting yourself in harm's way, without being reckless? And here's the secret to it. Live in deep relationship with Christ. Spend time with the lover of your soul. I've been really resonating with the verses from Song of Solomon. I am my beloved's and he is mine. Understand about the deep love of Jesus. This is not about you doing religious activity. It's about you having a deep relationship with Jesus Christ. Walking in his love, being led by his Spirit. But the alternative is living in fear and isolation until you die. In other words, having no life until you die. Some people die long before their body stops working. Here at Crosstown, we've been working hard to try to put tools in your hands so you can develop this love relationship with Jesus. While we were isolated, we emailed out those daily studies. It wasn't so, oh, I did the study, therefore I am a good person. It's not about being a good person. It's about being God's person. And it's all about connecting to him. What we, as the leaders of Crosstown, can't do is force you to cooperate. Force you into this relationship. This is not about Jesus rewarding you for good or religious behavior. This is about spending time with the one who loves you dearly. So in August, we'll be focusing on helping you grasp this reality. That God loves you dearly, because it's amazing the fears you will lose when you wrap your heart and your head around how much God loves you. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you've been given the gift of the Holy Spirit. So the lion isn't really much of a threat to you anymore. He can't steal your salvation, so he just tries to get you to forget that you needed to be saved. But what about those who don't know him? Or what about those who don't know what to do? We've been called to set the captives free. We get to be those heroes that storm the gates and draw them out. If you're a recluse, you will never step out and do what Jesus told you to do. You won't follow the lead of the Holy Spirit because you think, well, it's not safe right now. If you're reckless, you might be all gung-ho for Jesus, but you won't actually listen to his direction. God, I'm going to impress you and go do this. And he's like, the captives are this way. And you probably won't last very long. Because you'll try to do spectacular stuff for Jesus, and then he won't bless it because it's not his work. His work's over here. And then you get all upset and offended or burned out and you quit. So let me ask you this. What is your excuse for not doing what God has called you to do? What is your lion out there? I hear some people, well, I believe God's called me to do this, but it's not safe right now. I'm waiting for the culture to change. Oh, did you inform Jesus of how unwise he was in his commands of you? Well, I can't afford to do it right now. It wouldn't be financially safe because the king's treasury is empty. He can't take care of you. Well, I'm afraid what others will think. It's not socially safe to do that. I might say the wrong buzzword and then nobody will listen to me anymore. Well, they're not listening now because you're not saying anything. The real danger is never living the abundant life that Jesus intends for you.
That's right.
I think I've mentioned before, Shaylin is away at college in Pennsylvania, and she talks to these other students. She says, our school is in the safest bubble on the planet. Nothing happens in our community. They want to serve the homeless. They want to feed the poor. There are none. They're in a safety bubble. So they're all gung-ho for Jesus, and there's nowhere to do anything about it. And then she talks about Crosstown. They get all starry-eyed, like, that's exactly what following Jesus is meant to be. So they're going to do a mission trip to come to Crosstown. So they can go out with God's Feeding Hands and the CSI prayer team and spend a day at the Gospel Rescue Mission and experience, boots on the ground, what Jesus has called them to do. The real danger is never living the abundant life that Jesus offers you. Never experience the joy of storming the gates and pulling somebody out of the devil's hands. And both of you standing together saying, isn't God good? He's had mercy on us. His mercies are renewed every day. Let's go to him in prayer. Lord, I ask that right now you would pour out your perfect love on each and every person here. Lord, that you would expose the fears that people have because they might have rationalized that it's logic or it's somehow the reality that it's not safe to follow you. But the reality is they're saying it's not safe to follow you and you are incapable of taking care of them. Lord, I ask that you would open the eyes of their heart, that they would see that and know it and let go of it, and that, Lord, you would lead them to your promises in Scripture, that you are powerful enough, you are strong enough, you are loving enough to take them in through the gates of hell, to set the captives free, and you will not leave them behind. And Lord, any loss that we suffer, you refer to as pruning. It's weight that was holding us down. And Lord, that you even redeem our past before we even knew you. Those terrible experiences that we had, you transform them and empower and equip us through them to reach people who are going through something similar. Lord, in your kingdom, we never lose. And the nice thing is, there's enough room in your kingdom for everyone to win. So, Lord, pop our bubble. Take us out of our cage. Lead us out into your marvelous light that the enemy fears coming into. Lord, we want to walk with you. We want to know and understand your perfect love, that it would drive out every fear. We would know the joy of maybe hearing the lion roar and knowing that he has been robbed of his prey because we walk with you. Even though we walk through the very valley of the shadow of death, Lord, we will fear no evil because you are with us. Not that we're all big and bad, not that we're bold, not that we're reckless, trying to impress you, but because you said, come follow me, and we follow you wherever you call us to go. To talk to whoever you call us to talk to do whatever you call us to do. Not so we can avoid hell, but because heaven is in your presence each and every day that we walk with you. Lord, do a work in each and every one of us today, I ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lord.
We're going to sing a couple more verses.